Good day. Thank you for attending TalentGuard's webinar entitled Driving Employee Engagement Through Career Pathing. My name is Linda Janak. I'm the President and CEO of TalentGuard, and career pathing is one of my favorite topics to speak about. My goal is to share a few ideas with you so that you can take inside your organization and discuss with your HR team some methods or strategies to help improve retention and engagement within your organization. I have extensive experience in career pathing. I've probably worked on 200 plus projects over the last 10 years or so in a variety of different industries and company sizes. A couple of housekeeping rules. You can ask questions all through the presentation, but we will not answer them until the end. And we are recording this so that you are able to download it and share it with your team. And usually the presentation's on the website by the end of the day. So you will have access to the materials. So why career management is changing, or more specifically, career pathing? Well, we believe, based on our experience, that career pathing is an incredible way to improve engagement and retention within an organization. But let's just look at some of the statistics. Companies today are spending on average $460 billion in annual preventable turnover. 7 out of 10 workers are not engaged. I've seen organizations spend countless dollars on programs to try to decrease that annual cost and try to increase engagement, but without much success. And I've seen many HR people become frustrated, employees become frustrated. And I think it boils down to a very simple area, and that is when no career paths exist for employees to either advance in their career or acquire new skills, they become very dissatisfied and they ultimately leave your organization. There's been research report after research report, and it's clear that employees want career development. I think if you look at your own employee surveys, career development typically is on the top 3 of what employees are looking for. And I want to share, I think, another growing problem that organizations are facing and why career pathing may be able to help. And it's a chart put out by Burson, who's now Deloitte. But what's interesting about this chart is when I started to work on a project and we were focused on an organization that was hiring a lot of millennials. And as you know, millennials are going to be the largest demographic over the next 5 years that are entering the workforce. We saw a trend that they were changing jobs every 2 years. Now, we say that, that might be okay for some organizations, but for most it's not, and here's why. When organizations are spending a tremendous amount of money, we're talking hundreds of thousands and even millions of dollars on recruiting and onboarding great talent, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of resource, it's a lot of training. So we're spending all this time, we're spending all this money, we're bringing the employee in, and at the point where the employee is going to start to provide an economic value to the organization, this is where that timeline is, and they're going to start to be productive within this green space at the top. This is where employees are starting to exit. This is what we call the millennial squeeze. Now, it's during this particular time after onboarding, and this time horizon can be different for different organizations. This is where we've identified that career development or career pathing is essential to increase the tenure of those employees. And when I start to think about the number of baby boomers that are exiting, the number of millennials that are turning over and over, it's gonna present a much larger problem for organizations who are going to continue to grow at a rapid rate. So what do we do about it? Let's just take for a moment a look at career management and how it's evolved, since the early 50s, let's say. When companies first started to think about career development, they really took on almost all of the ownership and responsibility for developing that employee. They said how the employee needed to develop, when they needed to develop. They were driving the employee's career. We didn't at that point really see things like career paths like we see them today. It was traditionally you enter a job, you were in a particular job for a long period of time, and over an extended period of time, you may have had 2 or 3 different promotions. So you didn't really have to think about developing new skills to go in a variety of places across the organization. Well, when we kind of fast forward into 2015 and beyond, we've seen a trend over that time where employers put more responsibility for career development on the employee. So we have this term called self-directed career management. And I think that's exactly the direction that employers need to take. However, when we put the onus on career development at the employee level, we must also teach them and train them how to effectively manage their career. And that is something that I don't see a lot of organizations doing. I mean, we're not taught how to do this in high school. We're not taught how to do it in the university. We don't learn how to do it when we first enter the workforce. And I think it's a skill set that's very challenging when you're thinking about how to navigate from one career to the next. And it requires a lot of skills in terms of how to assess yourself, how to come up with a strategic plan, how to follow through that plan, and thinking long term. So we've got the right idea, but I think a few things are broken down. And we're going to lead you through that process, I think, on how to fix them. But what's even more challenging today is because we've had so much turmoil in the economy, organizations became flatter. Employees had to take on more responsibility. So there was an elimination of the number of moves that one could take up the corporate ladder. And organizations had to come up with other clever ways to retain employees. So we start thinking now in context of a career lattice where one can move up, across, and down an organization. So the gist of today's discussion is really going to be around that career lattice and how we can use that strategy to drive that employee engagement. So what is career management? And we talked about it briefly, but I believe it's a process that helps an employee chart their own course. So we've got that self-directed development there. And it involves a variety of areas that the employee must become proficient in. The ability to set goals, to assess their skills now, to assess what's required for the future. We need to be able to look at an employee's holistic, collective experience, not just the experience they're gaining on the job with you today, but everything and how that helps your company be more competitive in the future. We have all of the knowledge that they've gained throughout their career and their qualifications, things like certifications and certificates and continuing education and degrees. And we take all of that and we have to teach them how to put it into a plan that's consumable. And we have to be able to have many steps in that plan and then get feedback from a variety of people. And those include the managers, the employees, and external coaches. And that plan needs to shift as the employee continues to develop in your career. So it should be a living, breathing document. Now, let's spend a little bit more time thinking about the career ladder versus the career lattice. And I think Deloitte put together a nice slide that I'm sharing with you here, where in the old-fashioned sense of the word, and we still think in these terms today, especially these young, energetic employees who want to move up to the top level as quickly as they possibly can. It's very hierarchical. Typically, we're looking within one department. For example, HR, we're coming in as an associate, and we still have on our glasses, and we're looking at how do I become the VP of HR. But in a lot of organizations these days, what we're seeing is that we want to enable employees to have multiple moves over, so a lot of lateral moves. And at the same time, and I think this is a really important point, is when we have these baby boomers leaving the organization, sometimes there's forced retirement, but where we don't have forced retirement, instead of them just leaving the organization, can we present them with opportunities to decelerate their career across the lattice, also making room for people to move up? So, typically your lattice is going to be, you'll have many moves up, you'll have many moves across, you may have many moves down. And I think if you can start to think about this as a philosophy in your organization, it goes a long way to building a strategy that keeps people longer. Now, when I go into organizations and I start talking to employees about how they feel about their career, typically it comes with a lot of confusion. They don't know where to start. They believe their company doesn't support career mobility within their company. And I put this slide in front of you because I think it's a great representation of confusion, where an employee is in a particular role, which represents you are here with that arrow, and they're in a role and they know they have some skills and they don't know how to move from one path to the next. They don't know what skills are required. They don't know what job vacancies are open. They don't know if they're going to meet the qualifications of that next role because it's not published. Sometimes the organization has no career paths at all. They don't have progression paths built out. They don't have job roles built out. So there's no structure to how career pathing can work. And I know it frustrates employees, and I know it also frustrates HR people because you'd like to provide the structure and the infrastructure to be able to develop employees, but sometimes you just don't know where to start. And that's why we're here today to talk about that. But before we move into our specific case study, I think this slide depicts some of the frustration that you may experience. And I'm just going to spend a little bit of time with starting here with the centralized organization. Typically in your centralized organization, it's going to be organized by department. So most career pathing, the visibility that employees have are going to be within their own group. So if I'm in sales, I'm only going to see opportunities within sales. If I'm in product, I'm only going to see opportunities within product. We might not have a lot of hierarchy or layers underneath. And these types of organizations, you're typically going to be having the manager say which jobs are available and which are not. And it's a lot easier to do career pathing in an organization like this because typically you're going to have a lot less job roles or job role profiles, for an example, or your job family. Now, we deal a lot with organizations that are decentralized, and typically they have their own P&L, they have their own independent business units, and within those business units, you have your sales and your marketing and your engineering and your merchandising, whatever those organizations might be, and they have their own independent HR people who in each of those divisions, even across all those different job roles, let's say sales associate, in those divisions, all of those job roles have different descriptions. And even though they might be 90% the same, there might be some words different, they're different descriptions. So when North America is trying to help their European division, who's trying to help their product division, and HR is looking across and saying, now how do we actually synchronize these so that we make it easier, not more complex for employees to navigate across the organization? We just have a lot more data to work with, and we have some solutions around how to do that. Typically, what employees want to see when we're thinking about the career ladder or the lattice is that, or what they really want is visibility. They want to be able to see visibly in some fashion that if I'm here on the green, for example, I can go from product coordinator, product manager, development director, and a VP. That's your traditional centralized organization is what you're seeing here. What they typically don't have visibility into is, well, if I'm a product manager and I have certain competencies and or skills and qualifications, that they want to see the roles that might be closest to them. What roles might be the easiest to make a move into? And in this simplistic view, they would be able to see, oh, I can move into being a marketing coordinator or a marketing manager. Now, in this typical example, you might only have 50 job roles, and it's easy to show something like this on an intranet or on some pretty sheets. But when you start to have a much larger organization with hundreds of job roles and it's decentralized, a chart like this doesn't scale. So how can we put something together that enables the employees to have that visibility without putting a tremendous burden on HR. What I'd like to do is walk you through a case study. We call it Engaging the Workforce, how one large consumer packaged good organization used career pathing with TalentGuard to overcome some of these retention and engagement issues. Let me tell you a little bit about the company. We call it Company C. You can see here they have about $8 billion in revenue. They have over 15,000 employees. They're a hugely recognized brand, and they had a few challenges. They were really struggling to find and retain employees, first and foremost within their customer success team or the business analysts, kind of lower level in the organization, and keeping them in the roles enough time to develop them so that they could then navigate, if you will, throughout the career ladder. So what was happening is these employees were coming in and then leaving within a year and a half, and it was causing a tremendous amount of pain for the organization. Now, they had some generic competencies, but they didn't have the full job role profiles built out with all the competencies and proficiencies levels to help employees have that visibility. And they didn't have any way whatsoever to show the different career progression paths that one would be able to take if they stayed with the organization for an extended period of time. So the annual impact to the organization was about $60 million a year on turnover costs. And the goal was to reduce turnover by about 10% in the first year. So from the employee's perspective, I like to bring things in when I'm doing my case studies down to the employee's view and then build it back up to HR, because I really want you to understand that the employee and how they're feeling and how we can move them beyond where they are today into a place where they're really happy. So for this case study, we're going to be talking about Sam Holloway. He is a business development manager at Company C. He's been there for quite a few years in that business development role. And he does have career aspirations. He wants to be able to move into a VP position at some point. He has a master's degree. And Sam, overall, after looking at all of his performance reviews, he was a very high performing employee. His 360-degree reviews came back very positive. He had a solid track record. He shows up at work on time. He wants to progress. He is a very valued employee by all measurements at this company. Now, let's talk a little bit about how Sam approached his career. So, as a self-directed person, he enrolled in about 20 different skill development classes on his own and even on his own dime. He was networking internally, attending any of the career fairs that they had on site, meeting new managers across the organization. He was taking time out of his day to really understand the organization and all the different business units. He had a specific mentor that he worked with, and this particular organization had internal job postings that he had applied for many times over, and he was just very proactive. However, Sam was overlooked for several promotions and lateral moves. He was not sure every time you'd apply for these things because they were so vague and they didn't have enough information. He wasn't really sure if he actually had the skills to be able to qualify for these roles. So in his mind, he's thinking, I think I have the skills. I think I have the qualifications. I'm doing great. Everybody tells me I'm great. So why am I not making any movement when I'm making these internal applications? So he's very, very frustrated. He's not sure where his future lies. So as you know, when you get to that point as an employee, all these questions start to surface in your mind. Should I join another company? Should I start looking at different career options? I mean, how do I know what competencies develop in other roles? The managers are a little bit vague about this. Who can help me advance in my career? I just don't have any visibility in how I'm going to do this. So what do you think Sam is doing with his time? Well, we could probably guess, right? He's probably spending part of his day surfing online to see what the competitors are offering, to see if there's something else out there where he might be able to make a move. So as a result, He's increasingly disengaged. He wants to know what to do. And if he doesn't have a move soon, Sam is going to leave. He's going to be one of those statistics, one of those millennials that, is within that 2-year window. So HR obviously steps up to the plate and they're responding. And this is Jane. Jane is the head of HR. She's been with Company C for 5 years, and she is a proponent of career pathing. So we worked with Jane to help her figure out how she could achieve engagement through career pathing. And the solution that we approached with them was to build a formal career path program because they didn't have anything at all. Now, what we did was most people think, oh, you've got to start and do the whole organization at once. That is a false belief. You can start small, and you can start small in many different ways. You can start within a department. You can start with the hardest to fill roles. You can start with the highest turnover roles. We decided to start with the roles that were hardest to fill, and these required very specialized skills and the highest turnover. We conducted an assessment of competencies across all the job roles within those specific areas. We established a very solid competency framework. Now, like I said, they had some competencies built out, but we actually purchased a library from a third party to really build them out well so that we could do gap analysis. And then we specifically focused on sales and retail because those were the 2 fastest growing. So how did career pathing help improve engagement at Company C? The goals, what we were being measured by, our KPIs were to reduce turnover, and as we said, it was 10%. We wanted to see higher productivity out of these departments. On the annual survey, we wanted to see that survey move from an average survey to move from average to good, so we wanted 1 step in our rankings. We wanted to definitely reduce the lower recruiting costs by having more mobility from within. And then overall, if we do those 4 things, we're going to see more profitability on the bottom line. So the 4 steps that we took with Company C are as follows. We call it TalentGuard's Career Pathing Framework, and I'm providing you with all of the steps that you would take in order to do career pathing within your organization. And there are 4 phases. 1, build the foundation. 2, assess roles and profiles. 3, build the career progression paths. And 4, develop your talent. So let's get into building the foundation. So when I think about building the foundation, the first thing that you need to do as an HR organization is to do an assessment of what type of job family, job hierarchy, job role data that you have today. We call this career core competencies. And what you need to look for is, do you have a basic framework? Basic framework would mean you don't have a lot of data or nothing in place. I would say intermediate framework would mean you have competencies in job roles, you have a job family, but you might not have your proficiency levels built out. And what I call a complete framework is when you have your job families, your competencies, your job roles, your proficiency levels, and your learning resources all tied together. The challenge is that I'd say probably 90% of organizations that we work with are starting from a no framework perspective. So what we need to do when we come into your organization is start to look at your core competencies, how these core competencies translate to your, what we call your job family. So most organizations, like I said, starting here at the bottom, have these core competencies. Then we say, how do we break those core competencies or add on those core competencies to be job specific? Terms that I like to use are the technical competencies. What specific skills are needed to be a sales associate? What skills are needed to be a sales VP? And then we start looking at the levels. Typically, your levels are going to be, this person has no experience at all, and this person is an expert. And the reason why proficiency scales are so important is because we're enabling employees to assess themselves against all the steps that they would need to take to get to some endpoint, some end destination. And the end destination is wherever that role completes itself. In some organizations, it's VP. In some organizations, it's senior VP. And when we're thinking about lateral moves, that's going to take a long time for somebody because that's usually a journey. Then we look at role-specific requirements, and these are things like qualifications, experience, preferences. Do I want to work full-time, part-time? Where's the role required, U.S., international, those sorts of things. And then, typically most organizations will have their grades. Now, this is where HR starts to feel a little bit overwhelmed because they think, oh my gosh, I don't have this information. It's going to take me years to build it out. I don't even know where to start. Well, the good news is that there are many companies that exist in the industry that provide you with industry benchmark, high quality competency frameworks that have all of the data that you need. And then all you have to do is edit. We provide that as well. We've done a lot of content aggregation, but you have your Lomingers, your HRSG. These are all really quality organizations that help simplify that process for HR. Now, what happens next is once we get you to a point where you say, all right, we know our job families, we know our departments and how those job families split. So we have sales. We know our departments have product brand through inside sales. We know what all our job roles are. So each one would have your core competencies, your job family, your proficiencies, and then your definitions. Once we get there, and like I said, you can buy or you can build, then you can start to create a standardized job role profile. Now, this is just an example. Some organizations do this on paper. Some organizations have part of it in an HRIS system, part of it in a applicant / recruiting tool. Some people have it all automated in a talent management system. Rarely have I seen it all together. So typically what we do is we like to work with you to figure out how can we bring all those disjointed pieces of information together in one view or in one database so that we can then use and execute on that data later. But what you're going to see here from what that hierarchy looked like in the previous slide is in your role area here, that's typically stuff from your HRIS. This is usually your job description in your different database. Your competencies might be somewhere else if you have them. Sometimes people aren't thinking about what are the feeder roles, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But if we start looking at the competencies and we start breaking it down, what has to be in place, this is just mandatory for career pathing, is, as an example, and I'm breaking this down for you as we go, this is what a proficiency level would look like. And I know not a lot of people actually use these, but if we set our competencies for this role, which was in sales, under the job family sales, under the role business development, and then we start looking at regional business development, regional sales, and then regional VP, we say that these competencies have to spread across all of those job roles, but you're going to see the person who is the biz dev manager only need them at a level 1. The people who are regional sales directors need skill at a level 2 and a level 3. And you're going to have a mix match for any role of level 1s through level 3s or level 5s or however many levels we set for each organization. So this really is the foundation for how we're going to start to enable employees to build visual career paths, accessing the data that they need in order to have that mobility, which is the next step. So how do you enable employees to start career pathing? Well, the first thing that they need, once HR has built all of that data, right? So we have the job role side, and then on the employee side, you need your talent profile. And again, you might have an HRIS system that stores all that data, but in our experience, employees don't really have access to be able to use that data to go build out career paths because that's usually in the back office. So that's part of it. So we do need access to some of that HRIS data, or we have to be able to enter it if you don't have an HRIS. Employees need a place where they can store their entire career history. So, not only the jobs that they've been in within your company, but all of the jobs across their entire career. And it's important for HR because you're able to search on all of this later when you need to do succession planning. And then the other things that we need to be able to do is track our skills, capabilities, qualifications, and preferences. And that's typically going to be managed by your 360 feedback, your performance reviews, your development plans, and your self-assessment, where employees can manually enter that. And the reason why we call this dynamic is because employees continue to develop over time, so you need to give them a platform. Again, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or if you need to scale, it needs to be some kind of automation where this information can be updated and stored and used as the employee continues to change their career and their career path. So how do we build those progression paths? Well, the first thing that we do with your organization as HR is we start to say, as an example, if we're looking at the hardest to fill roles, we start to break down those competencies and do a lot of comparisons. Where do we have similarities within our competencies so that we can start to build feeder roles into the roles that are hard to fill and then the next role? And typically when I work with HR, I'll say, let's set a standard that roles need to have a 75% similarity. What that means is for 75% of the roles, they have to be shared. They have to share the same competencies and the same levels. And the reason why we want to do this is if an employee comes in and they start to build a career path, and I just say red is nothing, yellow is you have some, and green is you're good. If an employee starts with a career path and everything is red, it's intimidating. So this is where proficiency levels help us, where we can say, all right, an employee, this is how your profile looks today and how you're rated and how you're assessed in your business development role. And if you want to have one move over or one move up, they may have several green, several yellow, and several red gaps in their plan that will help them feel confident of, oh, this is achievable. So what does that actually look like? Now I'm going to pull it together for you in a very visual way to show you how each of these steps build on one another. So once we have the data for the talent profile and the employee has all that data entered and or you're helping them through your HRS integration, and we have all of our job role profile data, what we're going to be able to do is enable employees to compare their talent profile to the job profile and see what percent match they are, what their overall fit is this a role that's growing within your company? And we're going to be able to suggest development options that help them close the gap. And that's really what we call a career path. Now, Company C executed it in a couple of different ways. They wanted to do something first and foremost with paper because they didn't have a lot of technology to use. So what we did is we implemented, there were 12 roles that were hard to fill. So we created these wall-sized graphics, and we showed, based on experience and based on interviews that we conducted, the most likely path that an employee could move through an organization to get across and up to the roles that were most coveted. And in this example, you can see someone here starting as a revenue management analyst, took a couple lateral moves, had a couple upward moves to get to that director of revenue. Now, for each one of these moves through the lattice, we needed to be able to provide an Excel spreadsheet that showed the differences in competencies between the first role and the second role. And that's what you're seeing here. And it's a very simplistic way to do that. Like I said, in organizations that are smaller, this is much more reasonable to do because you're not dealing with a lot of job roles. For larger organizations, it can become burdensome. So you would see that obviously there are some gaps between the analyst and business development. So we would highlight those in red. And then we would demonstrate in the next column, here are the specific things that you can do to close the gap. And then it was up to the employee to take this information, to put it in their individual development plan, which was also driven by Microsoft Word, and then go develop that information. Well, over time, what we found is, it's really hard to maintain that. So as the company starts to mature, they have to think about, well, how do I do this in a much more efficient way where we're not having a lot of paper going a lot around, we don't have to update a lot of paper and keep all these things going. So over time, you're going to want to, at some point, automate the process. And there are, a few companies out there that provide career pathing software, not many. TalentGuard is one of them. But if you're going to choose a vendor, you have to look for one that will enable the employee to be the center. And in this example, if you're looking at the blue in the middle, the employee in this instance is an accounts payable manager. That's the starting point. And the little areas in green, we call it the flower. These are going to be what populate the flower based on the roles that are most likely attained or that have the most percent match. As I said, we had a 75% threshold. Now, what the employee is able to do and what HR gets to set is, do you only want to show moves within the department? Do you want to show moves across departments in centralized organization? Or do you want to show transition across divisions? So if you have an organization that has many brands, for example, do you want to show how someone could move, and this is just an example, from your restaurant number 1 to restaurant number 2 if you want to keep it all in the same family. And all of those have different levels of work that need to be done. But what an employee is able to see is what percent match are they, and then they get to add information or steps to their career plan that they can then execute on. Once they build that plan, what they're able to see automatically, and this is just another example, is you want to make it easy to show what their gaps are. And in this example, we're showing your general, those are your soft skills, your technical, those are role related, your qualifications and preferences, and we're using a simple method. Green is you're a great match. Yellow is you've got most of it covered or you're not a match at all. But what's more important, and as we move into that employee development section, is if we are going to say you're a match or not, even if you're a match, you still want to be able to provide employees with learning resources and development options that make them even better at what they do, right? Because it's about skill development. We don't want to say you're a strong match and not recommend any skills to develop, because we want to promote being a development focused or development oriented culture. So you're able to serve up learning resources, which automatically get added to their development plan. And in some cases, if you have people who are experts in those competencies, you're able to follow them to see what types of things they start to communicate on. So it makes it highly interactive for the employee, for the manager, and for HR, because now we get to see, wow, what are employees really interested in? Why do they want that career path? They get to save many different career paths. It doesn't have to be just one. And what does that do for the employee? It gives them possibility. It gives them transparency. Now, career pathing would not work if we don't help follow through on the process. And that follow through is we've got to develop the employees. And I won't spend a lot of time on this slide because, you understand what a development plan is. You understand what needs to get done. The challenge that I see is in most development plans, people will attend a communication class, and it's just an open generic one. They don't really know why they're attending the communication class. They just got dinged on it somehow, and they don't specifically know what they need to develop in terms of communication. Is it their writing skills? Is it their executive presence? And so by having those proficiency levels, we can get very, very specific. And then we can start to manage it over time because it's online, it's in our face. We can access it via our mobile phones and our iPads and our computer, and it's shared. So again, if you're going to do it via paper, you're going to document it. It's going to sit in a desk, but you still have it, and I give you kudos for that. Or it's going to be online where you can have that ongoing feedback between the manager and the developer. And what career pathing does, and I always say career pathing is focused on the employee and succession planning is focused on the manager. You have the foundation now. You know exactly what employees are interested in. You know what their skills are. You know what the gaps are. So what you've done through this process is you've first and foremost focused on the employee. You've helped them develop. But what you really get, the real big benefit, is that now you have all the data that you need to truly do succession planning in the right way, because you can't do succession planning the right way if you don't have this level of information. So what were some of the results? The lessons learned, I always like the debriefings. What did we learn as we went through this process? Career path is long-term. It takes management and employees quite a bit of time to learn how to do it and learn how to do it effectively and know how often we need to share and communicate with each other on our actual development plans. You got to have a solid framework. You don't want to start this half-baked. That's really critical and key. Employees must have the tools and the training. We have to present them with opportunities across and up the ladder, and we want to be able to track those movements so that we can prove to the executive team that it works, and we can tie it back to one of our KPIs. And feedback is key. As a result, what we saw, some of the results, employees are taking an active role. Most employees had 3 potential roles of interest defined in their career path. They are collaborating on average 2 times a month on their IDP, and this is trackable feedback between employees and managers. And their retention and engagement numbers are on the rise. We don't have the final numbers yet because we're still in the midst of doing the surveys, so we will have some of those in the next coming months. Universally, this is just some data that we've seen across 40 or 50 different career pathing implementations, so some things that you can expect should you choose to move down this path. In the first month, about 32% of the employees as part of this program actually engaged with it and created roadmaps. By 3 months, we had 39% more. That's in addition to the 32%. And by 6 months, we had an additional 18%. So we had a significant portion of the company in the 80 percentile, 80% wise, actually engaged in career pathing with an engaged development plan. On average, employees built up to 6 paths over that year. Each path had an average number of 4 moves. Each move had an average of 3 to 4 development goals per competency. Employees spent on average 3.2 hours on their employee talent plan. And about 19% mobility is what we've seen, which that's how we dramatically reduced the cost to hire. So that was really effective. A couple of words about TalentGuard. We are a full talent management solution. We have a full suite of software offerings that we bring to the marketplace. Our expertise, what we're most known for is our career pathing module because it's most unique and it's actually hard to do if you've not done it before. And we'd be happy to talk to any of you about career pathing if you have interest. Finally, we have another webinar in February, eliminating manager discrepancies in employee evaluation ratings. What that really is about is if you have managers that rate really hard and you have managers that rate almost evenly across the board, how do you start to teach them to rate the right way so that we can truly drive performance? And we also have a white paper on our website in our Learning Resource Center on how to successfully implement career pathing. It's just a much broader look and deeper look at the information that we've discussed here. It looks like I ran a little bit over on time, so I think I'm going to have to just ask you to spend a minute or two sending me your questions, and I'm going to have to answer those electronically. So what I will do is collect your questions. I will put them in the email that I send to you, letting you know that the webinar is now available for download. And if you have any other questions, always